Hello everybody, in this talk I will present some linguistic considerations on what we know about the Morotoco language spoken in the 18th century in southeastern Bolivia. Morotoco is a lost language or linguistic variety belonging to the Zamucoan family. The name Morotoco already appears when the city of Santa Cruz de la Sierra was founded in Bolivia in the 17th century. The Morotoco people mentioned in the 17th century may have been a Zamucoan group, but there is not enough information, so we are not sure about this. In the 18th century, the Jesuits contacted the Zamucoan peoples and identified 4 Zamucoan dialects: the so-called Zamuco, which gave the name to the family, Ugaroño, Morotoco, and Caipotorade. Each dialect was spoken by various Zamucoan groups, which you can see here. We refer to these as dialects, as the Jesuits called them, but it is not really clear whether they can be considered dialects or rather distinct languages. It seems, however, that there was some kind of mutual intelligibility between these varieties. The Jesuits chose one dialect, Zamuco, as the language for evangelization, and Zamuco was documented by the Jesuit father Ignace Chomet. Zamuco gave the name to the linguistic family, and therefore we call it Old Zamuco in order to distinguish it from its family of languages, that is, the Zamucoan family. Old Zamuco was documented in the 18th century and it was spoken until the first half of the 19th century. We know very little about the other Zamucoan varieties of the 18th century. Today 2 Zamucoan languages are spoken, that is Ayoreo, which is the closest language to Old Zamuco. Ayoreo has about 5,000 speakers in southeastern Bolivia and northern Paraguay. The other language is Chamacoco, which has about 2,000 speakers in the department of northern Paraguay in Paraguay. Morotoco was spoken by the Morotoco, who gave the name to this variety, by the Carrera, the Cucutade, the Panana, and the Tomoeno. As you can see here on the map, Morotoco was spoken in some of the so-called Jesuit missions of Chiquitos in southeastern Bolivia. These missions are famous because 6 of them were declared UNESCO World Cultural Heritage in 1990. More precisely, Morotoco was spoken in the missions of San Juan Bautista, Santo Corazon, and in the mission of San Ignacio de Zamucos, which was abandoned in 1745 and is now lost somewhere in the jungle. We have a few data available for Morotoco in the 18th century. There are basically 2 types of data: ethnonyms of populations contacted by the Jesuits through the Morotoco, and given names and surnames recorded in the missions. From the available historical sources, we know that the Morotoco were the first Zamucoan group that was contacted by the Jesuits. Also, they served as guides and interpreters for the Jesuits. Since the ethnonym of a population that was used by the Spaniards was usually the name given by the people who established the initial contact, some of the ethnonyms that are documented in the 18th century in the area come from Morotoco. This is the list of Morotoco ethnonyms from the 18th century. As you can see here, some of them show the masculine plural ode or de. This plural is the same plural as the masculine plural of today's Ayoreo, which was different from the masculine plural odore of Old Zamuco and lo of Chamacoco, although all of these suffixes are diachronically related. The masculine plural suffix that you observe in Morotoco ethnonyms is not always ode. The vowel o is deleted if the root ends in a, as in Cucutade and Caipotorade. The same deletion is found in Old Zamuco and Ayoreo. Here there is an example with a cognate, which designates a tuco-tuco that is a type of rodent. In Zamucoan languages, there is nasal harmony. If a suffix is close to a nasal consonant or vowel, the voiced alveolar stop of the suffix turns into an alveolar nasal consonant. You can see this here in the plural of mountain. In Ayoreo, the masculine plural suffix is ode, but if there is nasal harmony, the suffix undergoes nasalization into one. In Morotoco there is also nasal harmony, as you can see in ethnonyms such as Charayane and Curucane. Here there was a nasal vowel that was not indicated in the Spanish-based orthography. This is the internal classification of the Zamucoan family. Unfortunately, we cannot classify a 10th century Morotoco because we do not have enough information on it. What I want to show you here is that the masculine plural Odoe of Old Zamuco is the most archaic form, and in the ethnonyms that come from Old Zamuco we find Odoe. The same plural form in Odoe can be reconstructed for Proto-Zamucoan. Interestingly, in Aioreo, Odoe turned into Ode. The same innovation is found in the 18th century Morotoco plural. Now, I do not mean that Aioreo comes from Morotoco. Aioreo comes from a variety or from the merger of several Zamucoan varieties spoken by the Zamucoan groups who decided not to live in the Jesuit missions of Chiquitos. But we don't know exactly which variety or varieties. Let's now consider the onomastics of Morotoco. In 2022, Martinez published a very well-done study on the migration of Morotoco and Chiquitano groups to Mato Grosso, Brazil, in the 18th century, and she published a list of given names and surnames of 29 Morotoco speakers that are attested in documents from 1768 to 1782. As you can see here, everybody has a Spanish name and an indigenous surname. As Martinez notes, all Morotoco surnames end in de, and there is a clear association between final de and the Morotoco speakers. In Aioreo and Old Zamuco, the orne is a technonymic suffix. When the first son or daughter is born, the father receives the name of the child plus the suffix de or ne. For example, the father of Macha will be Machade. This is obviously technonym because we refer to the father with the name of the child. My hypothesis is that the Morotoco surnames originated from the indigenous name of the father. For example, in Vicente Sorotide, Sorotide was the indigenous name of the father that the Jesuits probably used as a surname after the Christian name of the person. We know that in many societies people do not have surnames. Surnames originate when it is necessary to distinguish between more people with the same name, and this is exactly what happened when many people went to live in the same mission. Then the Jesuits created a system of patronymic surnames, that is, they come from the father's name. The formation of patronymic family names is something very common. Many Spanish family names are patronymics, because when in the Middle Ages Spanish surnames originated, the father's name was often used to distinguish two individuals. For instance, if somebody has the family name González, they have an ancestor named Gonzalo. Many Chiquitano surnames that originated in the missions come from the indigenous given name of the father. In Aioreo there is nasal harmony, which we have already seen. So if the suffix is de, it becomes ne under nasal harmony. For instance, umari plus de yields umari ne. Amo plus de yields amo ne. However, the suffix for the father's name in Morotoco is always de. There are several Morotoco family names that have a nasal consonant near to the suffix. So the suffix should become ne, because in Morotoco there is nasal harmony. So with this suffix de, there is an exception to the general rule that we have observed in the plural. And this is important because this indirectly confirms that de is not a plural suffix. If de were a plural suffix, it would nasalize, so we would have forms such as mamune, motosignone, instead of manude and motosignode, which are the forms that are attested. The lack of nasal harmony in Morotoco surnames is not only interesting, because it is an exception involving family names, but also because the same exception is found in some varieties of Ayoreo. Indeed, according to Pia's data, in some varieties the technonymic suffix de does not nasalize into ne. For instance, a group called Nupedogosode say Erika de, Anna de, and Christina de. And in the last two names there is no nasalization, even though there is a nasal consonant that is contiguous to the suffix. This Ayoreo variety has maintained the original form of the suffix, which was de, as in Morotoco. I say that de is the original form of the suffix because it stems from the word father, whose root is dai. So dai turned into the suffix de. By contrast, in the Ayoreo variety spoken by the Cochocoigosode, in Rincón del Tigre, Bolivia, the technonymic suffix is always nasalized independently of the nasal harmony, so that they say Ericane, which, according to the general rule, should be Ericade, because there is no nasality in Erica. Although Morotoco shares some similarities with Ayoreo, it is different from the Zamucoan languages that we know better. For this reason, the meaning of most Morotoco family names is not clear. However, some family names can be interpreted thanks to what we know about the Zamucoan languages and culture. And this in turn gives us more information about Morotoco. The first name we can interpret is Maria Cristirade or Oritirade. In Cristirade, the root is Cristira. The sequence of the two initial consonants k and r is usually not found in Zamucoan. When there are exceptions, such as this one, to the phonotactic rules, this indicates that there is a loan word, and Cristira is the adaptation of the Spanish name Cristina. The only difference is that the nasal consonant n corresponds to a rhotic r in Morotoco. This can be explained by the loss of nasality. N becomes d, and there is a subsequent lenition or articulatory weakening of the alveolar consonant d into a rhotic r. These are well-known phonetic changes in Zamucoan, so Cristirade is the father of Cristina. So most likely Cristina was the first daughter and Maria was a younger daughter. It seems that Maria has two surnames, Cristirade or Oritirade. A possible hypothesis is that the father was known by two different given names. It is possible that the first daughter had a Spanish name, Cristina, and an indigenous name, Oritira. We don't know what Oritira means. Another possibility is that the first daughter or son had died, and the father was also called by the name of the eldest surviving child. Among the Ayoreo, if the first son or daughter dies, the technonym of the second child is the new one that is used for the father, so there is a change in the father's name. So it is possible that Maria's father had two different names due to the death of a child. Now let's look at other family names, but first let's consider what we know about Ayoreo given names. The Ayoreo traditionally gave children the name of an animal, a plant, an object, or anything else related to the child's birth, or to a particular event that happened to someone in the family. It was normal to use a common noun as a given name. So, for instance, the late Gabriele Capia, in his monumental study of Ayoreo culture, reported the story of an Ayoreo who had seen a friend who had gathered very beautiful bird feathers, and out of admiration, he had said that when his child would be born, he would call him Amatai, what is gathered, collected. And here is a picture of Amatai Chikenoi, who was a friend of the late Gabriella Capia. Therefore, behind each name there was often a story. And this also allows us to recognize some words in the Zamucoan given names attested in the 18th century. For instance, among the names of the old Zamuco-speaking people, in this case not Morotoco-speaking people, there is the name Nupe, land. Among the Morotoco surnames there is Mocovide, the father of Mocovi. And we know that the Mocovi are an indigenous group. They speak the homonymous language, which is a Mataguayan one. Mocovi is not a Zamucoan word, But maybe something happened with the Mokovi, and the child was called Mokovi. Then there is the name Ignacia Potigade. Potiga means shame in Old Zamuco, so Potigade was literally the father of shame. Clearly we don't know the story, we don't know why the child was called shame. The root of shame is the verb poc, be ashamed, which is found in Old Zamuco and in Chamacoco, but not in Aioreo. Tiga is a derivational suffix used for abstract nouns. For the formation of abstract nouns, there are several allomorphs whose selection depends on the ending of the base. Tiga is found in Old Zamuco and Aioreo, but it was lost in Chamacoco. Tiga is the suffix added to roots that end in a plosive consonant, exactly as in poc. So, for instance, to Old Zamuco petec, who what is hated, you add tiga, which yields petetiga, the hate, and similarly to Aioreo etec, you add tiga, and the result is the abstract noun etetiga. This indicates that Morotoco, like Old Zamuco and Aioreo, had the suffix tiga for the formation of abstract nouns, and it was added to the same type of roots. Also, in Morotoco, as in Old Zamuco and Aioreo, sequences of two consonants, such as kt, were avoided, and for this reason there is the deletion of k in the verbal root poc. I will show you the same type of deletion in other examples. Shame cannot be another given name for Ignacia, because in Aioreo and Old Zamuco all abstract nouns are masculine. And in Aioreo we know that masculine nouns are used for males and feminine nouns are used for females. So shame was probably the name of a brother. Another name we can analyze is Maria Sinachude. Sinachu corresponds to Sirinachuk, dry, in Old Zamuco. Dry is an adjective, but adjectives can also have a noun phrase in Zamucoan. Sinachude was literally the father of the dry one. Sinachu is not the same as Sirinachuk, but we must consider that in many Zamucoan varieties there is deletion of the intervocalic rhotic consonant. This deletion is also found in Morotoco, and in this list of names there is Lucia Yamide or Yaramide, which shows the elision of the rhotic consonant between two identical vowels, as probably occurred in Sirinachuk, in Morotoco, which became Sinachuk. The intervocalic rhotic is retained in Old Zamuco, but in many Aioreo varieties the intervocalic rhotic is deleted. The Aioreo variety of Rincón del Tigre is famous because it preserves the intervocalic rhotic. In Morotoco the word Sinachuk was masculine, and we know this because in Old Zamuco the feminine was Sirinachuge, which clearly doesn't correspond to Sinachuk. By contrast, the lack of final k can be explained because, as we have seen before, the final consonant of the root is deleted before another consonant, and in this case the consonant is that of the suffix de. So the dry one here doesn't refer to Maria but to a brother. We can also say something about the structure of the word. In Old Zamuco, Sirina is the verb be dry, and chuk is a derivational suffix to form adjectives. It is not a very common suffix, and it is selected by only a few roots. Therefore, the combination of this root with the suffix chuk is further evidence that Sinachu is the adjective dry. Finally, another interesting name is Felipe Piogade. Piogade probably comes from piogap, which is small fire. Pioc is the root of fire in Old Zamuco and Aioreo, and ap is the diminutive suffix, which is also found in Chamacoco. When a suffix that begins with a vowel is added to a word that ends in k, there is usually voicing, so that k becomes g. Pioc plus ap yields piogap, and the final consonant p can be deleted before another consonant, such as the alveolar stop d of the technonymic suffix de. So piogap plus de yields piogade. There are examples of the deletion of root final P in Old Zamuco and in Ayoreo. Here I've just reported one example for Old Zamuco. As I've shown, we can interpret the meaning of some Morotoco surnames. For others, it is also possible to attempt an interpretation, although it may be more speculative. For instance, in Tomás Ipotiegade could stem from the same root as Old Zamuco and Ayoreo Ipotigat, who, what is desired. But in this case the correspondence is not exact. There is one E too much, which I'm not able to explain. The table here shows the linguistic features that could be identified in the Morotoco spoken in the 18th century. Martinez also mentions some Chiquitano people with surnames ending in de, such as Socuede, Supode, and Peade. The interesting thing here is that the voiced alveolar stop d is not part of the phonological inventory of Chiquitano, and therefore these words are not Chiquitano words. Since these family names come from the mission of San Juan Bautista, where the Chiquitano and the Morotoco lived together, there were possibly Chiquitano speakers with Morotoco surnames or descendants of the Morotoco who identified themselves as Chiquitano. This shows that the merger of different groups occurred in the missions, which also caused a rapid linguistic change in the 18th century Zamucoan varieties, including Morotoco. I have shown that the 18th century Morotoco had characteristics found today in Ayoreo, and also similar to those of Old Zamuco. There is, for instance, a word list with data on 4 Zamucoan varieties collected by d'Orbigny in the first half of the 19th century. As Kelm already noted, Morotoco in this word list is the variety with the lowest percentage of lexical similarity with Old Zamuco and Ayoreo. In my analysis of this data, I could identify in Morotoco the masculine plural suffix da, but not the plural suffix ode. This shows us the difference between the Morotoco spoken in the 18th century and the one spoken in the 19th century. Finally, we also have seen that behind these family names there were possibly personal stories that were not recorded in any other way. Thank you very much for your attention.